Have you ever had a first date that seemed perfect, only to have it take a dark turn you could never have predicted? Tonight we'll dive into 8 terrifying stories of first dates that turned into nightmares. Stories that will make you question whether you really know the person sitting across from you. Before we begin, how are you doing today? I hope you're ready for a spine-chilling journey through some of the most unsettling first date experiences. Whether you're new here or a long-time listener, I'm glad you decided to join us tonight. You're about to hear stories that will keep you up at night questioning what's real and what's not. These aren't just ordinary dates. These are encounters that leave a lasting scar where the danger isn't just a bad date, but something much, much darker. So grab a seat, get comfortable, and prepare for a ride into the unknown. I can't wait to share these eerie tales with you. Let's dive in and see what happens when things go terribly wrong. Let's begin. Now that we've set the stage, let's jump right into the first story. The haunted restaurant will make you question how well you really know someone, even when everything seems perfect. So let's see what happens when a seemingly innocent date takes a dark turn. Story 1. The haunted restaurant. I'd always been cautious with online dating, but she seemed different. Her profile was sincere, charming, her smile warm and inviting. It wasn't a typical profile. There was something raw about her photos. No filters, just moments captured in time. She had mentioned in her bio that she loved hiking, reading, and long walks in the park, and everything seemed so genuine. Her messages felt real, something I hadn't encountered in a long time. We agreed to meet at a small cafe downtown, and when the evening came, I was a mix of nerves and excitement, eager to see what she was like in person. She arrived on time, and I saw her before she noticed me. Her long dark hair framed her face perfectly, and her eyes were bright with an intensity that made my heart skip a beat. But something in her gaze didn't feel right. It wasn't warm like I expected. It was more like she was measuring me, studying me before she even said a word. She walked over with confidence, and when she smiled at me, I noticed how wide it was. Too wide. Her smile was perfect, flawless, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. I couldn't quite put my finger on it, but there was something unsettling about her presence. We sat down and began talking. The conversation began naturally enough, small talk about work, hobbies, interests. But I started to feel a slight unease creeping in. Her eyes didn't stay fixed on me for long. They darted around the room, scanning everything, and when they met mine again, she would smile, but it was a little too wide, a little too controlled. Her laugh was a bit too loud, too rehearsed. It didn't feel like a genuine connection. It felt like a performance, and I was beginning to realize I was just another spectator in her carefully planned show. As we continued to talk, she leaned in slightly, her face growing more intense. "Do you believe in ghosts?" she asked, almost out of nowhere. It wasn't a question I was prepared for, and I blinked, unsure of how to respond. I've never really thought about it," I said, nervously stirring my coffee. "I'm more of a skeptic, I guess." Emma smiled, but there was something darker behind her eyes, something that I hadn't noticed before. "You should," she said, her tone dropping, "because some things, they never really leave." She looked at me for a moment longer, as if waiting for my response. I felt a chill run down my spine. Her words were cryptic, unsettling, and I couldn't help but feel a little uneasy. The atmosphere in the restaurant had changed. The warmth had faded, replaced by a cold, uncomfortable tension. I looked around the room, trying to shake off the feeling of dread that was creeping in. That's when I noticed the old man sitting at the table across the room. He was staring directly at us, his eyes hollow and fixed. His skin was pale, almost ghostly, and he had a strange aura about him, something cold and unnerving. I shifted uncomfortably in my seat, but when I turned back to Emma, she didn't seem to notice. Her smile had returned, but now there was something off about it, like she knew something I didn't. "Is everything all right?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "Everything's perfect," she replied, her eyes locking onto mine with an intensity that made my breath catch. "But some things don't stay perfect forever." Her words lingered in the air between us like a warning, a promise, or a curse. I wasn't sure which. The rest of the evening passed in a blur. I tried to shake off the eerie feeling that had taken hold of me, but it wasn't easy. Emma's presence was both comforting and unsettling, as though she were both here and somewhere else at the same time. I couldn't tell if I was imagining it, but her movements seemed too fluid, too calculated, like she was following a script. It was as if she were playing a part, and I was the only one who didn't know the lines. When the bill came, I offered to pay, but Emma insisted. There was a strange finality in her voice as she told me, "I've got this one. It's the least I can do." As we left the restaurant, I glanced back over my shoulder. The old man was still there, watching me from the shadows. The door to the restaurant creaked shut behind us, and for a moment I stood there feeling a weight settle over me. We walked down the street, the silence between us thick with unspoken tension. I couldn't help but feel like something was off, something that I couldn't explain. "So what?" Now I asked, my voice trembling slightly. Emma turned to me, a faint smile tugging at the corners of her lips. "Maybe we'll see each other again," she said, her voice soft but cold. "But if you're lucky," I stopped walking, suddenly chilled to the bone. The words echoed in my head as I watched her fade into the shadows. If you're lucky. But was I lucky, or had I just walked into something I couldn't escape? The next morning, I tried to call her. No answer. I sent messages, but they went unread. Her profile on the app had disappeared. No trace, not even a goodbye. I shrugged it off, but the feeling of unease didn't go away. I couldn't shake the thought that I had somehow been part of something I didn't understand. Days passed, and I tried to move on, but something about her stayed with me. Her smile, her words, her cold, calculated gaze, it all haunted me. A week later, I walked past that same restaurant. The windows were dark, the lights inside dimmed as though the place had been abandoned for years. I stopped in my tracks, my heart pounding. There was something off about it, something I couldn't explain. And then I saw her reflection in the window. Emma. She was standing inside, watching me from the dark. But when I turned to look, the restaurant was empty. I never went back. That was the haunted restaurant, a chilling reminder of how quickly things can go wrong. Now, let's move on to the silent caller. This one's sure to leave you wondering who or what might be lurking just a phone call away. Story 2. The silent caller. I remember the first time I heard from her. It was a random night, the kind where you don't expect anything out of the ordinary. I had just gotten home from work, settled in with a book, and the usual quiet of my apartment enveloped me. That was when my phone rang the name on the screen, unfamiliar to me. I almost didn't answer, but something pushed me to pick up. "Hello," I said, slightly unsure. The voice on the other end was soft, almost too soft, and carried a strange sense of calm. "Is this Alex?" I nodded, realizing I was still holding the phone up. "Yes, who's this?" There was a long pause before she answered, almost like she was hesitating. "I've been trying to reach you. It's important." I didn't know what to think. The voice sounded calm, almost too calm, and there was a sense of urgency beneath it that I couldn't quite place. "Who are you?" I asked, my heart beginning to race as curiosity took over. But instead of giving me an answer, she simply repeated herself. "It's important," she said. "You need to listen." I felt a cold chill crawl up my spine. Something wasn't right, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I needed to hear more. "What do you mean? Why are you calling me? Again?" There was silence, and then she spoke, her voice carrying an unsettling flatness. You don't remember, do you? That night? You remember me, don't you? My mind went blank. The night. What night? I couldn't remember anything significant. I'd been on dates before, but this wasn't one of them, was it? She didn't sound familiar. Her voice wasn't anyone I knew. I'm sorry, You don't remember, she interrupted, her voice taking on a more commanding tone. But I remember you. I felt a wave of nausea wash over me. This wasn't just a stranger calling. There was something deeply wrong here. Who is this? I repeated now, a little more forceful. Why are you calling me? Her voice softened again, almost coaxing. Because you need to know. It's not over yet. The game is still going. I froze, the words hitting me like a slap in the face. Game. What game? My hands tightened around the phone as I tried to process her words. The silence on the other end felt oppressive, like something was lurking just beneath the surface. I felt like I was being drawn into something I didn't understand. My heart pounded in my chest as I pressed the phone tighter to my ear. Who is this? What do you want? I asked again, but there was no answer. The line went dead. I stood there for a few moments, the weight of the silence pressing down on me. My fingers trembled as I tried to comprehend what had just happened. It felt like I had been dropped into the middle of a puzzle with no idea what the pieces meant. My mind raced through possibilities, trying to recall any encounter that could explain this, but there was nothing. I tried to push it out of my mind. I told myself it was just some prank call, the wrong number, someone trying to mess with me. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. That night kept echoing in my mind, and with every passing second it felt like I was sinking deeper into something I couldn't escape. The next day I tried to go about my usual routine, but it was impossible to focus. My phone sat beside me, a constant reminder of the eerie conversation. I had to know more. I tried calling the number back, but it went straight to voicemail. No surprise there. I didn't leave a message, but the thought gnawed at me. I was obsessed with finding out who she was, what she meant, and why she had called me. Then that night it happened again. The phone rang. My heart skipped a beat. I almost didn't want to answer, but something inside me urged me to pick up. I felt a sense of inevitability as I tapped the screen and held it up to my ear. Hello, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. The voice on the other end was unmistakable, and it sent a chill through me. You're starting to remember, aren't you? My stomach dropped. Remember what? Who are you? The woman didn't answer my question. Instead, she asked something else. Do you remember the park? That day? The park. The day. I tried to recall any significant event that took place there, but nothing came to mind. What park? I asked, the tension building in my chest. The one where it all started, she said softly. You thought you could forget, but it's never over. A sudden realization hit me like a lightning bolt, and I froze. The park. I did remember something. The faintest memory, a fleeting image of a woman standing alone, watching me. It was blurry, like a dream I couldn't fully grasp. And the more I thought about it, the more I felt that horrible sinking feeling, like something I should have remembered but couldn't quite place. What happened in the park? I asked, my voice shaking. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she gave a soft laugh, almost like she was amused. It's too late to ask questions now, she said. The game is still playing. You're already part of it, and there's no way out. I tried to speak to demand answers, but the line cut off before I could get another word out. Again, silence. My hands were trembling so badly I could barely hold the phone. The eerie calm of her voice echoed in my mind, and my heart raced with panic. I didn't know what this was or how to stop it, but I knew one thing for sure: I wasn't in control anymore. The following days blurred together, each one feeling like an endless cycle of waiting for the next call. I couldn't stop thinking about the woman's words, the way she had spoken to me as though she knew things I didn't. Her message. The game is still playing was a constant shadow hanging over me, one that I couldn't shake off. And then on the 5th day, it happened. I received a text. It was brief, simple, and chill in the park. Tonight. Come alone, if you're brave enough. I stared at the message for what felt like hours, my breath caught in my throat. The park. It was the same place from my memories. The place I'd forgotten. I knew I had to go. I didn't want to, but I had no choice. I had already been pulled into something far beyond my control. I grabbed my jacket, my hands shaking as I left my apartment. It was time to face whatever waited for me. From a call that seemed harmless, we now transition into the vanishing date, where a perfect evening unravels in a way no one could have predicted. Buckle up, because this one takes a terrifying twist. Story 3. The Vanishing Date. I had never been one to rush into relationships. I liked the idea of getting to know someone, slowly building a connection over time. But when Emily's profile popped up on my dating app, something about her made me feel like I was ready to skip all the small talk and dive straight in. Her photos showed her in a cityscape at dusk, a soft smile lighting up her face as she stood next to an old church. Her bio was simple but genuine, talking about her love for literature and cozy coffee shops. We chatted for a couple of days before deciding to meet in person. She suggested a local cafe, small, quiet, and familiar. I arrived early, scanning the room for her, wondering what she might look like outside of the carefully curated photos she had shared. The cafe was dimly lit, the scent of roasted coffee filling the air. I ordered a drink and sat at a table near the window, watching the world outside. I couldn't help but feel a little nervous, but as the minutes passed, I started to relax. It felt like a good spot, perfect for getting to know someone. And then she walked in. She was even more beautiful in person. Emily's presence filled the room, her eyes searching for me with a quiet intensity. She smiled when our gazes met, and I stood up, feeling a wave of relief. I was already beginning to feel more comfortable, like this date might actually go somewhere. We sat down, exchanged pleasantries, and started talking. Her voice was warm, her laughter contagious, and there was something magnetic about the way she spoke. We found common ground, quickly discussing our favorite books, places we wanted to travel, and the little things we enjoyed. It felt easy, natural. But as the conversation went on, something started to feel off. It was subtle at first. Emily would occasionally glance around the cafe, her eyes darting from one corner to the next, almost as though she were looking for something or someone. At first, I thought it was just nerves. Maybe she was shy, but then I started noticing the little things. She kept shifting in her seat, avoiding my gaze, her smile faltering just for a moment when I mentioned something personal. The more we talked, the more it felt like she wasn't fully present. It was as if part of her mind was elsewhere, and I couldn't shake the feeling that she wasn't being entirely honest with me. The air between us started to grow heavier, as though there was something she wasn't saying, something lurking just below the surface. I decided to ask her about it. "Is everything okay?" I said, trying to sound casual. She paused for a moment, her fingers playing nervously with the edge of her coffee cup. "What do you mean?" She asked, her voice a little too calm. "You've been kinda distant, are you alright?" She didn't answer right away. Instead, she looked past me out the window, and for a brief moment I saw a flicker of unease in her eyes. It was gone just as quickly as it appeared, replaced by the same soft smile she had worn earlier. "I'm fine," she said, her voice tight. "Just thinking." I nodded, but something in her tone didn't sit right with me. I wanted to press further, but something told me it wasn't the right time. So we continued talking, but it wasn't the same anymore. The conversation became strained, the silence between us awkward and heavy. I could feel my unease growing like a knot in my stomach that wouldn't go away. I wanted to leave, but I didn't want to be rude. I told myself it was just nerves, that things would improve, but deep down, I couldn't ignore the feeling that something wasn't right. And then it happened. Emily stood up suddenly, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. "I think I should go," she said, her voice flat. "It's getting late." "What already?" I asked, my confusion deepening. "But we just got here." She didn't respond right away. She simply grabbed her coat and started walking toward the door. I stood up, quickly rushing after her. "Emily, wait," I called, my voice rising. But when I reached the door, she was already gone. I looked around, but she had disappeared into the night. I stood there in the doorway, staring out into the street, feeling a strange sense of loss. I couldn't explain it. I thought maybe she had just left because she wasn't interested, but the way she left without saying another word unsettled me. I stood in the doorway for what felt like an eternity before I finally returned to my seat, trying to piece together what had just happened. My phone buzzed in my pocket, snapping me out of my daze. I pulled it out and there was a text message from Emily. It read, "I'm sorry. I didn't mean for it to go this way. I can't do this anymore." I stared at the message, confusion flooding my mind. What was she talking about? The date hadn't gone badly, had it? I quickly typed back, asking her what she meant, but before I could hit send, I noticed something strange. Her profile had disappeared from the dating app. I checked my contacts, but there was no record of her number. I tried calling, but the call went straight to voicemail. It was like she had never existed. I sat there in stunned silence, staring at my phone, trying to make sense of it all. The rest of the night passed in a blur. I tried to shake off the feeling of dread that had settled in my chest, but it lingered gnawing at me. The next day, I went back to the coffee, hoping to find some answer, some clue to what had happened. I asked the barista if they remembered her, but they just shook their head. They didn't even recall seeing anyone matching her description. I went home feeling more confused than ever. The following days were filled with unanswered questions. I couldn't get Emily out of my mind. And then a week later, I got another text from an unknown number. It simply said, "You're not the first one, and you won't be the last. You're all part of the game." The words hit me like a punch. The game. What game? I tried to call back, but the number was disconnected. That's when I realized I'd been part of something. Something I didn't understand. And now I couldn't escape it. After the vanishing date, it's time to dive into the mysterious invitation. Sometimes a seemingly innocent request can spiral into something sinister. Let's find out just how far things can go when you're drawn into someone else's game. Story 4. The Mysterious Invitation. It had been a long week of work, and I wasn't expecting anything unusual when I checked my phone that Friday night. There was a message from a number I didn't recognize. It wasn't uncommon for my phone to buzz with notifications from apps or from people I had met briefly, but this one stood out. It was brief, just a simple text, but it caught my attention. "You don't know me, but I think we should meet. There's something important I need to tell you. Meet me tonight at 8 p.m. Don't bring anyone. It's better this way. No name, no explanation, just the time and place." I stared at the message for a while. At first, I thought it might be a prank or perhaps someone with the wrong number, but there was something about the way it was written that made me pause. It didn't feel like an ordinary message. It felt calculated, like it was meant for me. There was a sense of urgency that made me uneasy, and yet something inside me also stirred with curiosity. I had been feeling restless lately, as though something was missing in my life. And maybe this was the answer to that gnawing feeling. I decided to go. After all, it was just one meeting, right? What harm could it do? The location was just a few blocks away, a quiet bar in the city I hadn't been to before. I put on a jacket and left my apartment, trying to shake off the sense of unease that was slowly creeping in. The street was quiet, and as I walked, I couldn't help but wonder who had sent the message. Who would want to meet me so urgently? I arrived at the bar around 7:50 p.m., feeling a mixture of excitement and anxiety. It was tucked away in a corner of the city, almost hidden, and the dim lights spilling out of the windows made the place feel more mysterious. I stepped inside the door, creaking behind me. The atmosphere was dark, cozy, and almost too quiet. The bartender gave me a brief nod as I walked past him, scanning the room for anyone who might be waiting for me. There were a few patrons scattered around, but no one stood out. There was no one who seemed like they were expecting me. I checked my watch. 8:00 p.m. No one had arrived. I felt a sinking feeling in my stomach, wondering if I had made a mistake. I was about to turn and leave when the door to a back room opened. A woman stepped out. She was dressed in black, her features soft and almost ethereal, like she was out of place in this world. Her eyes locked onto mine the moment she saw me, and without a word, she began walking toward me. She didn't smile. Her expression was unreadable, but there was something about her presence that made the air feel thicker. "You came," she said. Her voice calm, but with a certain weight to it. "I'm glad." I didn't know what to say. I simply nodded, still trying to figure out what was going on. She gestured toward the back room. "Come in," she said, leading me through the door without waiting for a response. Inside the room was dimly lit, almost too much so, and the smell of aged wood filled the air. There was a table in the center of the room with 2 chairs and a large map spread across it. The map looked old, worn at the edges, as if it had been used for years. "I know this seems strange," she began as I sat down, "but there's something you need to understand, something you've been a part of without realizing it." Her eyes were unwavering, piercing into me as though she could see straight through to my soul. I felt a shiver run down my spine, but I couldn't look away. "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice tight with confusion. "You've been chosen," she said simply. "You and others all unknowingly part of something bigger, and tonight it's your turn to learn the truth." I didn't know what to think. The words didn't make sense. Chosen. I was just an ordinary person, living an ordinary life. How could I possibly be part of something bigger? But her presence was so overwhelming, I couldn't bring myself to speak. She reached into her bag and pulled out an old notebook. It looked ancient. The pages yellowed with age. She opened it to a page marked with a symbol I didn't recognize, a series of intersecting lines forming an intricate pattern. "This is the mark," she said. "The symbol of those who are chosen. You've seen it before, haven't you?" My heart skipped a beat. I had seen that symbol. It had been in a dream years ago, a recurring image always just out of reach. I had never thought much of it, but now it all came rushing back. The strange dreams, the sense of familiarity with this place, this moment. I felt my pulse quicken as the pieces began to fall into place. "It's been watching you," she continued, her voice barely above a whisper. "And now you must decide what role you will play. There are others people you trust who are part of this, but you are different. You have a choice to make, one that will determine the path ahead." I didn't know what she meant by that. My mind raced as I tried to make sense of it all. Who was she? Why was I being pulled into this? What do I need to do? I finally managed to ask, my voice trembling slightly. She slid the notebook across the table to me. "Look closely. The answer is here, but it's up to you to understand it." I picked up the notebook, feeling a strange sense of dread as my fingers touched the worn pages. The symbol stared back at me, haunting, familiar. And then, as I traced the lines with my finger, I realized something. There was no way out. Whatever game she was talking about, I was already a part of it, and there was no turning back. Moving on from that chillin' invitation, our next story is the disappearing date. Things were going well until they weren't. Get ready for a ride into the unknown where every second feels like it could be your last. Story 5. The disappearing date. I was never one to believe in love at first sight, but when I met her, it felt different. Her name was Claire, and she was everything I'd been looking for. Smart, funny, and stunningly beautiful. We'd met on a dating app, exchanged a few messages, and quickly realized we had a lot in common. Our first conversation flowed effortlessly, and after just a couple of days, we decided to meet. The plan was simple, a quiet dinner at a local restaurant, nothing fancy. But as I arrived, I felt a strange sense of anticipation. It wasn't nerves exactly. It was more like something just felt right. I stood outside the restaurant for a moment, checking my watch, wondering if she was already inside. The door opened, and there she was, walking toward me with a smile that lit up her entire face. She was just as beautiful in person, if not more so. We greeted each other with a hug, and she immediately put me at ease with her warm presence. We sat down, and for the first time in a while, I found myself completely focused on someone else. The conversation was easy, full of laughs and lighthearted banter. Claire was a great listener, and as I talked about my job, my interests in my life, she asked just the right questions. It felt as though we were two old friends reconnecting. We shared stories, some serious, some silly, and everything felt natural. But as the night wore on, something began to feel off. The restaurant, which had seemed lively when I first arrived, now felt unusually quiet. The noise of clinking glasses and laughter from other tables seemed muffled, like it was coming from far away. Claire's smile never faltered, but her gaze had become distant. Her eyes seemed to drift around the room, and I could sense a shift in her demeanor. It wasn't much, just a subtle change, but it was enough to make me uneasy. "Is everything okay?" I asked, my voice uncertain. She blinked almost as if she was coming back to reality and smiled at me. "Oh yeah, everything's fine. Just tired, I guess." I nodded, trying to shake the feeling that something wasn't right. We continued eating, but it was clear something had shifted between us. The conversation slowed, and there was an awkward silence that lingered longer than I was comfortable with. I tried to bring it back to something lighthearted, but no matter how hard I tried, the atmosphere felt strained. It was then that I noticed something strange. The waiter had come and gone, but when he passed our table again, I realized that his eyes were fixed on Claire. I looked at her, then back at him, but he quickly turned away, his face pale. I didn't think much of it at first, but the more I watched the staff and the other patrons, the more I realized that everyone seemed to be avoiding eye contact with her. It was like she was invisible to them, but not in the way you might expect. They weren't ignoring her exactly, they were just distant, and that's when the unease turned into something deeper. "Claire," I said, my voice trembling slightly. "Are you sure everything's okay?" She looked at me, but this time her eyes weren't quite as warm. They were cold, almost distant, and for a moment I didn't recognize her. "I told you. Everything's fine," she said, but her voice had lost its usual warmth. The smile she gave me was now empty, like she was forcing it. I tried to shrug it off, but something about her tone unsettled me. I glanced around again, and that's when I saw it, the empty table across from ours. The chair was just barely turned facing me, but when I looked back at Claire, she was no longer sitting across from me. The seat was completely empty. I blinked and looked around, trying to make sense of it. But when I turned back to the table, Claire was there again, staring at me with a strange intensity. She wasn't smiling anymore. "You okay?" she asked, her voice almost mechanical. But it wasn't her voice anymore. It sounded like something else was speaking through her, something cold and distant. I felt a cold sweat form on the back of my neck. I reached for my phone, but when I looked down, I realized that the time had stopped. The seconds on the clock weren't moving, and neither was the world around me. My heart began to race. I stood up quickly, the room spinning around me, and I grabbed my coat. "I'm sorry, I have to go," I said, my voice shaking. Claire didn't say anything at first, but when I turned to leave, she stood up as well. "You can't leave yet," she said, her voice flat and cold. Her eyes locked onto mine, and for the first time, I felt truly terrified. I backed away slowly, my heart pounding in my chest. "I don't know who you are," I whispered, my breath coming in quick gasps. "But this isn't real. It's too late for that," she replied, her voice now a distorted echo of itself. The air around me grew colder, and the walls of the restaurant seemed to close in. I turned to run, but when I reached the door, it wouldn't open. I pulled at the handle, but it was locked. Panicking, I looked around for another exit, but there was nothing. The room began to close in on me, and Claire's smile returned, this time too wide, too perfect. "You should have left when you had the chance," she said, her voice distant. But this time I couldn't move. My body was frozen, trapped in the space between reality and whatever nightmare I had just walked into. "You can't escape," she whispered. The last thing I remember before everything went black was Claire's smile, as empty and cold as the space around me. When I woke up, I was back at home alone. I checked my phone, but there were no messages, no missed calls, no trace of Claire. The restaurant's name wasn't even on the map anymore. I searched for it, but it was as if the place had never existed. The more I tried to remember, the more it felt like the whole night had been a dream. But deep down, I knew it wasn't. I still don't know what happened that night. All I know is that Claire was never real. And yet I can't shake the feeling that she's still out there watching, waiting for me to come back. And this time, I won't have a choice. After the disappearing date, we head into the blind date from hell. You think you're prepared, but sometimes the biggest surprises are the ones you never see coming. Let's explore how quickly everything can fall apart when nothing is as it seems. Story 6. The Blind Date from Hell. I had always been skeptical about blind dates. There was something too random about them, too uncertain. But when Emma's profile appeared on my phone, something about her drew me in. She wasn't like the others I had seen. She had an air of mystery about her, a quiet confidence that felt genuine. Her photos were simple, yet elegant, nothing overly staged or polished. She seemed down to earth, someone who didn't need to put on a show to be interesting. After a few days of chatting, we agreed to meet in person. She suggested a small local coffee downtown, one I hadn't been to before. I had no reason to doubt her, so I agreed. I arrived a little early, walking through the familiar streets, trying to calm my nerves. The coffee was quaint with its warm lights and the smell of freshly brewed coffee lingering in the air. I sat by the window waiting for her to arrive. The clock on my phone ticked by slowly, and as the minutes passed, I couldn't help but feel a little nervous. I had been on dates before, but something about this one felt different. A few minutes later, the door opened and she walked in. She was even more beautiful than her pictures. Emma had long, dark hair and a quiet elegance about her. She smiled when she saw me, and for a moment I felt like I had known her for much longer than just a few days. "Hi," she said, her voice soft but warm. I stood up to greet her and we exchanged an awkward hug before sitting down. The conversation started out light, the usual questions. What do you do for work? What do you like to do in your free time? Where do you see yourself in a few years? But as we spoke, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Her eyes would dart around the coffee as though she was looking for something, or maybe someone. At first I thought it was just nerves, but the more I watched her, the more I began to feel like there was something else going on. She would smile, but it never quite reached her eyes. Her answer seemed a little rehearsed, a little too perfect. As the night wore on, I began to feel uncomfortable, like I wasn't really talking to Emma at all, but to some version of her that wasn't quite real. I tried to shake off the feeling, but it kept growing like an itch I couldn't scratch. It wasn't until she asked me a question I wasn't prepared for that I truly started to feel unsettled. "Do you believe in fate?" she asked, her tone so casual as if we were simply talking about the weather. I hesitated. "Fate? I don't know," I replied. "I think we control our own lives, but I guess there are moments where things just seem meant to be." Emma smiled, but again it didn't quite reach her eyes. "I think it's all been planned for us," she said, her voice almost a whisper. "The things we do, the people we meet, the paths we take, it's all part of something bigger. Don't you think I felt a chill run down my spine?" There was something in her voice, a quiet certainty that made my stomach twist. "I don't know," I said, trying to brush it off. "It's a nice thought, I guess, but I don't believe that everything is predestined." "Maybe you're wrong," she said, her voice low and steady. She leaned in slightly, her eyes never leaving mine. "Maybe everything that's happened to you was meant to happen, including this." I wasn't sure what she meant, but her words hung in the air between us like an unspoken threat. I tried to shift the conversation, but it was as if she was controlling it, guiding it back to places I didn't want to go. We continued talking, but the unease in my chest didn't go away. As the evening wore on, the coffee began to empty out. The lights overhead flickered for a brief moment, and I couldn't help but notice the way the shadows seemed to shift around us, moving almost imperceptibly, like something was watching. The air in the room felt colder, and I found myself glancing around, trying to shake the growing feeling that we weren't alone. At one point, I looked up, and Emma wasn't sitting across from me anymore. The seat was empty. I blinked, wondering if I had imagined it, but when I looked again, she was sitting back in her chair, a little too still, staring at me. "Are you okay?" I asked, my voice breaking the silence. She didn't answer right away, just continued staring at me with that same eerie smile. "Do you ever feel like you're not in control of your own life?" she asked softly. "Like you're just a puppet in someone else's game?" The question hit me harder than it should have. I could feel my pulse quicken the air around me, growing thick with tension. "What do you mean by that?" I asked, my voice trembling slightly. She didn't answer. Instead, she stood up suddenly, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. "I have to go," she said, her voice flat and emotionless. "It's not safe here anymore." I stood up quickly, my heart racing. "What do you mean? What's happening?" But she didn't look at me. She just walked toward the door without another word. I watched her, leave a feeling of dread rising in my chest. Something was wrong. As I left the coffee, I pulled out my phone to text her, but her profile had disappeared. There was no record of our conversation, no trace of her anywhere. I tried calling, but the call went straight to voicemail. I was left standing there, frozen, as the night continued around me. The next day, I woke up to a message on my phone. It was from a number I didn't recognize. "You weren't supposed to see it. You weren't supposed to know, but now you're a part of it." I tried to block the number, but the messages kept coming. "The game has started, and you're already trapped." I don't know what she meant, but I'm starting to realize that nothing about that night was real. And the worst part, I don't think I'm the one who's been chosen to play. Now that we've endured the blind date from hell, let's dive into the chosen one, where a seemingly normal date quickly becomes something much darker. Prepare yourself for a story where fate isn't just an abstract idea, but a terrifying reality. Story 7, The Chosen One. I never liked the idea of blind dates. They always seemed too rushed, too impersonal, a gamble that rarely paid off. But when I met Sarah, it felt different. Her profile was simple, yet intriguing. No flashy pictures, just a soft smile and a short bio that spoke to her love for the quiet things in life. Reading hiking long walks in the park. We had exchanged messages for a few days, and each conversation felt easy, natural, as though we were picking up a conversation that had started years ago. So, when she suggested meeting at a small, cozy pub on the edge of town, I agreed without hesitation. The pub was exactly what I had imagined, dimly lit, with the sound of low conversations and clinking glasses in the background. It wasn't overly crowded, which was perfect for a quiet evening. I arrived a little early as always and grabbed a seat by the window watching the cars pass by outside. As the minutes ticked by, I felt the familiar anxiety creep in, the nervous anticipation of a first date. But when Sarah walked in, all of that melted away. She was everything I had hoped for, just as beautiful as her photos, with a quiet elegance about her. Her dark hair framed her face perfectly, and her smile was warm, genuine, as she walked over to my table. "Hey there," she said, her voice soft but steady. "Hi," I said, standing up and offering her a chair. "I'm glad you could make it." "Of course," she replied, sitting down across from me. "I've been looking forward to this." The conversation started easily enough. We talked about the usual things, work, family, hobbies. There was a natural flow to our words and ease that made me feel like I had known her for far longer than just a few days. But as the night wore on, something started to feel off. Every time I glanced at her, I noticed a strange intensity in her eyes, a deep focus that didn't quite match the light tone of our conversation. It wasn't uncomfortable at first, but it became more pronounced as the evening went on. It was as though she was studying me, watching my every move. At first, I tried to ignore it, but the more I thought about it, the more unsettling it became. She didn't seem like the type of person to be so intense, so calculating. She was sweet, gentle, but the way her gaze lingered on me made me wonder if I was missing something. At one point, as we were talking about a book we both liked, she leaned in slightly, her voice lowering as she said, "Do you ever feel like everything in life happens for a reason? Like we're all just playing our parts in a bigger story?" I blinked, not sure what to make of it. "I don't know," I said. I think we all make our own choices, but I guess some things do feel like they were meant to happen." Sarah smiled, but this time there was a certain coldness to it. "I think you're right," she said, "but sometimes I think our choices aren't really our own." Her words hung in the air for a moment, and I felt a cold chill run down my spine. I wasn't sure how to respond. It felt like we had just shifted from a casual conversation to something much deeper, much darker. "What do you mean?" I asked, trying to sound casual. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she looked down at her drink, her fingers lightly tapping the rim of the glass. "I think we all have a purpose," she said. Finally, her voice quiet. "Some of us are meant to do things that others can't understand. It's hard to explain, but I think you understand what I mean." I wasn't sure what she was getting at, but I could feel the tension building between us, a thick, almost tangible presence. "I don't know," I said, a nervous laugh escaping my lips. "I guess I'm just trying to figure out my purpose, like everyone else." Sarah's eyes flashed, and for the first time I saw something sharp, something unsettling in them. "You don't have to figure it out," she said, her voice now colder, more intense. "You've already been chosen." I froze. When I asked, my heart suddenly racing. Her smile widened, but it didn't reach her eyes. "You've been chosen," she repeated. For what I asked, my voice shaking slightly. But she didn't answer. Instead, she stood up abruptly, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. "I have to go," she said, her tone flat, almost mechanical. "Wait, what's going on?" I asked, standing up, trying to reach for her arm, but she pulled away. "You'll understand soon enough," she said, her voice now almost emotionless. "It's already too late for you. You're already a part of it." I reached out to stop her, but she was already walking toward the door, her footsteps quick and deliberate. She didn't look back. I stood there, stunned, my mind racing. trying to make sense of what had just happened. What did she mean by chosen? And why had she said it like that, as though it was something inevitable? I tried to call her, but she didn't answer. I texted her asking what she meant, but again, there was no response. For the next few days, I kept thinking about what she had said. It didn't make any sense, and yet there was a nagging feeling in the pit of my stomach, a feeling that something wasn't right. Something was wrong. I tried to forget about it, but every time I closed my eyes, I saw her face that cold, calculating smile and the words she had spoken. "You've already been chosen." I knew I couldn't ignore it any longer. I had to know what it meant. So I did some digging. I went to the places she had mentioned, the ones she said had meaning. But the deeper I looked, the more I realized something terrifying. I wasn't the first person to hear those words. There were others. And I was beginning to understand that being chosen wasn't a gift. It was a curse. It was the beginning of something I could never escape. I would never be free from it, and neither would they. Finally, we closed tonight with the Phantom in the park. It's supposed to be a peaceful evening in a quiet park, but sometimes things aren't as calm as they seem. Let's see how a first date can turn into something much more disturbing. Story 8. The Phantom in the Park. It was supposed to be just another date, a simple one, a first date with a girl I met on a dating app. Her name was Mia. She had a calming presence, a soft laugh, and a smile that made me feel at ease. We decided to meet at a park, a beautiful, quiet place with walking trails and plenty of open space. I thought it was perfect, the kind of place where we could talk without distractions and get to know each other. The evening was mild, the sun setting low behind the trees, casting long shadows across the park. I arrived early, of course, as I always did. I wasn't nervous at first, just eager to meet someone who seemed interesting and genuine. I found a bench near the edge of the park, overlooking a small pond. The air was still the kind of calm evening where you can hear the faint rustling of leaves, the sound of distant birds. Mia arrived a few minutes later, walking toward me with that same warm smile. She was even more beautiful in person, her dark hair tied loosely in a ponytail, wearing a simple sundress. She greeted me with a hug, and we sat down on the bench together. The conversation started easily. We talked about our favorite books, music, and movies. Mia had a way of making everything feel light and easy, and I found myself relaxing in her company. But as we continued talking, something strange started happening. I couldn't put my finger on it at first, but the atmosphere began to change. The park, which had seemed so peaceful at the beginning, suddenly felt different. It wasn't the weather, it was something else, something that I couldn't explain. It felt as though the park itself was holding its breath, waiting for something. Mia's smile remained unchanged, but her gaze started to drift. At first it was subtle, just a glance over her shoulder, a quick flicker of her eyes to the trees in the distance. But soon it became more noticeable. She seemed to be looking for something or someone. It wasn't like she was distracted, but it felt as though her focus had shifted entirely. "Is everything okay?" I asked, trying to break the strange silence that had begun to settle over us. Mia turned her head back to me, her smile still in place, but there was something about her expression that was off. It wasn't that she looked uncomfortable, but rather distant. "Oh yeah, I just thought I saw someone," she said, her voice soft, almost as if she were trying to reassure herself. "Who?" I asked, glancing around the park. There was no one nearby, no one walking down the trails, no one sitting on any of the benches. "I don't know, just someone. It's nothing." She chuckled lightly, but it didn't sound completely natural. It sounded forced, like she was trying to cover something up. The strange feeling only grew stronger as the night wore on. I tried to ignore it, but it was impossible. Mia's behavior became even more peculiar. She kept looking over her shoulder, glancing toward the trees, her eyes scanning the park as though she were expecting someone. and each time she did, I felt an odd sense of unease creeping in, like something was out of place. After a while, I couldn't take it anymore. "Mia, what's going on? Are you okay?" I asked, my voice more urgent now. She looked at me again, and this time there was a flicker of something in her eyes. Something that felt like recognition, but it wasn't a recognition of me. It was as if she had seen something else, something she wasn't ready to acknowledge. "I'm fine," she said quickly, shaking her head. Sometimes I feel like I'm being followed." I froze. "What do you mean? Followed by who?" She didn't answer at first. She just stared ahead, her face pale, her lips pressed tightly together. And then she spoke, her voice barely a whisper. "I don't know, but I've been here before. I've seen this park before, but it wasn't like this. It was different." "What are you talking about?" I asked, my heart starting to race. "I don't understand." Mia turned to face me, her eyes wide with something between fear and confusion. "The first time I came here, there was someone with me, but they're not here anymore. They never were. They never left." She said it so calmly, as if she had come to some realization, and yet it made no sense. I felt a cold sweat form on the back of my neck. There was something in her eyes, something deeply unsettling. I stood up, my mind racing. "We need to leave. Now." "No," Mia said quickly, grabbing my wrist. Her grip was firm, almost too firm. "We can't leave. You don't understand." "I can't leave. You have to stay." Her voice was desperate now, but there was something about her tone that made it clear this wasn't the same person I had been talking to just an hour ago. Something had changed. I tried to pull away, but her grip tightened. Mia let go. I shouted, fear rising in my chest, but she didn't let go. Instead, she looked behind me, her eyes widening in horror. I turned to look, but there was nothing there. No one in the distance, no one on the path. But when I turned back to Mia, she was staring at me with wide, terrified eyes. "You can't see it, can you?" she whispered. "He's right there. He's always watching." I backed away from her, my heart pounding in my chest. Who are you talking about?" But Mia didn't answer. Instead, she stood up slowly, her eyes locked on the space behind me as if something were moving in the shadows. She looked at me one last time, her face pale, her smile gone, replaced with a look of sheer terror. "You shouldn't have come here," she whispered before turning and disappearing into the trees. I ran after her, calling her name, but when I reached the spot where she had been, she was gone. The park was empty, the air still. I called out again, but my voice echoed in the silence. I was alone. I searched for her for what felt like hours, but there was no sign of Mia, no trace of her anywhere. The only thing left was the feeling that something was horribly wrong. I left the park that night, but I've never stopped thinking about her. I don't know who she was or what she saw that night, but I know one thing for sure. There was something in that park, something that didn't want us there. And sometimes late at night, I swear, I can still hear her voice calling out to me, telling me that I should have never come, that I should have never stayed. That was the phantom in the park, a perfect example of how quickly a peaceful evening can spiral into horror. And with that, we come to the end of tonight's journey. First dates are supposed to be full of promise, but as we've seen tonight, sometimes they come with a much darker twist. Well, that was certainly a ride, wasn't it? From eerie encounters to heart-pounding moments of terror, these first date nightmares remind us how unpredictable life can be. Who would have thought that a simple meeting could turn into such a chilling experience? The lesson here isn't just about being cautious when meeting new people. It's about trusting your instincts and recognizing the signs that something might be terribly wrong. As we wrap up tonight's journey, I want to hear your thoughts. Which of these stories gave you the chills? Have you ever had a first date that took a bizarre turn or felt unsettling in any way? Let me know in the comments, and if you've had any creepy experiences of your own, feel free to share. We're always here to listen, and sometimes it's important to share our stories. Thank you for joining me tonight, and if you want more spine-tingling tales, don't forget to subscribe. Until next time, stay safe, stay cautious, and always trust your instincts. Who knows what you'll encounter on your next first date? Good night.